Hello and welcome to the Bub Report. The first Black Republic of Haiti was struck by a massive earthquake on Saturday, August 14th. The 7.2 magnitude earthquake is said to be similar to the 2010 event in its impact. So far, the government says there is a death toll of 304 people, but it is expected to reach into the thousands in the next few days. The country's new president, Ariel Henry, also declared a state of emergency for 1 month.
Mes amis, en direct, pendant ma fait sport comme ça, heureusement pour moi, côté moyen pas tomber. Mais gros tremblement de terre qui pourrait passer au Kaila. Pour que tu te calmes pour ça moi, c'est équivalent le 12 janvier.
Oui, des gars comme le monde de terre fait dans les Anglais. Il y a des gens qui en bas, qui mourent, des gens qui n'ont pas fait.
The earthquake's epicenter was 7.5 miles away from the major population center of Louis du Sud and 5 miles away from the town of Petit-Trou de Nips on Haiti's western flank. A tsunami was also generated as a result of this major seismic event. Over in Grenada, Jab revelers took to the streets across the country in a massive show of defiance against the Government of Grenada and its decision to cancel the 2021 carnival holiday as a result of the public health threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Jab revelry witnessed this year was reminiscent of Eric Gary's decision to ban the playing of jabs in the town of St. George in 1977 as part of a massive crackdown against the burgeoning New Jewel movement in Grenada and fears of a Black Power uprising that was sweeping Trinidad and Tobago at the time. Historians say thousands of Grenadians defied Gary's orders on the island and witnessed a massive show of jabs in '77. Today we discuss the impacts and implications of last week's show of Jab force. Also on the report, we discussed the state of opposition politics in Grenada with two former public servants. Last week, the National Democratic Congress and opposition leader Tobias Clement decided to contest the next general elections under an alliance arrangement, while the TGM continued to take its message of being a viable alternative to the current crop of opposition alternatives across the country. We welcome our guests, Superintendent Sylvan McIntyre of the Royal Grenada Police Force, Human Rights Attorney Brian Concannon, author and creative Ricardo Kings Douglas, former Agriculture Minister and Leader of the Opposition Michael Batiste, political strategist William Joseph, and cultural enthusiast Colin Dow. We thank you for joining us. A pleasant good morning, a pleasant good evening, a pleasant good night, whatever time you're choosing to view the Bub Report. I am actually back in the hosting chair here in Washington, D.C. after a week and a half hiatus in Grenada. I had the opportunity to press the flesh with a number of you on island to discuss the Bub Report. A lot of you provided compliments and constructive feedback, negative feedback and positive feedback about the report, all of which we will take on board. But it was certainly a pleasure being on the ground in Grenada in the height of the cultural season, the unofficial carnival season, to see what was happening there. It was also interesting to really understand what is taking place on the island with respect to the politics, with respect to the socioeconomics at this time. Certainly, being away from Ireland does not really give you a real picture of what is occurring. So I was very pleased to be there during that week and a half vacation. For those of you who I did not get to see, certainly my time was short, but I will be back in Grenada soon again. But at this time, I want to take the opportunity to welcome my first guest, Brian Concannon, who is a human rights attorney, but who understands a lot of the dynamics in Haiti. As we know, yesterday we witnessed another earthquake in Haiti of a similar magnitude to what occurred in 2010. Brian, my first question to you is your friends and colleagues in Haiti, what is the situation on the ground with them?
Well, most of the people that I work with tend to be in Port-au-Prince, which was not hit that badly. And in fact, most of the country, people, there was not much earthquake damage. Everybody obviously has friends in the zones and everybody's very worried. But even more so, Haitians were so traumatized by the 2010 earthquake, and they know that there's been no real changes. So there's been no increases of safety. And that they are all traumatized now. All across Haiti last night, people were sleeping outside. There continue to be aftershocks that are felt throughout the country. So people are deeply traumatized on an ongoing basis by this. Plus, you do have the amount of people that are killed, which I think will go into the thousands, and the displaced people will go into the tens, perhaps the hundreds of thousands of people.
And Brian, thinking about just the massive scale of tragedy that this earthquake unleashed, it brings back, it harkens back to that 2010 period. But I remember in 2010, the international community decided that it was going to mount this massive show of relief, massive show of reconstruction. Some likened it to the Marshall Plan that occurred after the destruction of Europe in World War II. But fast forward to a decade and a year later, Haiti has nothing to show for that. So can you talk to us about, in your own experience, that lack of follow up that especially Western governments tend, they give lip service to it, but it just remains the same.
Yes, and as soon as the earthquake struck in 2010, we reached out to people who had been working on the Indian Ocean tsunami that had happened about a year before that, and they told us exactly what was going to happen. That you'd have massive amounts of troops coming in, people spending tons of money on overhead, on security, and people putting plans in place that sounded like they made sense in New York or Miami or Paris or Montreal, but that wouldn't survive contact with reality on the ground, and that Haitians would be brought in at the blame stage, so that you'd have poorly conceived and poorly executed plans that would predictably fail, and then people would find some reason to blame the Haitians. And that's exactly what happened. One of the things we were saying at the time was that you need to bring Haitians in from the very beginning. When you plan, when you execute, you need to be accountable to the Haitian people, not just to Western parliaments or Congress or to Western donors, but you really need to have something that's going to work as measured by the needs on the ground of the Haitian people. That was not completely ignored. There was actually a lot of lip service, as you mentioned, to building back Haiti better, but people were trying to build Haiti back better by doing the same things they always did. Again, kind of parachuting in these consultants rather than really taking the time and effort to engage Haitians to make sure that this was done in a sustainable way. And unfortunately, as you say, there's very little to show for it. There was some emergency relief, there was some rubble cleared, but really nothing sustainable had changed in Haiti's economy or its resilience to natural disaster. The other problem is one of political accountability, and where Haiti has not had, during that period of time, Haiti's had governments that were mostly imposed by wealthy, powerful countries to the north, especially the United States. And those leaders have been accountable to the United States, not the Haitian people. And so they have not had the same incentive that an elected, accountable government would have to build resiliency within the country.
And and that is a critical point because before this earthquake, we witnessed the assassination of Mr. Moise, and again we saw Western tentacles, even though they claimed that it was not necessarily Western interference there. But just when we look at these impacts on Haiti, like where do you see sort of a solution? I think the important point to note is that the Haitian people ought to be able to determine their own destiny, is what I hear you saying. So, what would you propose as a best outcome after this particular natural disaster? And again, Haiti is also prone to hurricanes. We have a hurricane that was just formed in the Atlantic, which is expected to also affect Haiti in the coming days.
Yeah. Hurricanes are actually a great example because when hurricanes hit Haiti, the death toll is typically 1,000 times more than any other country. Often there's been several hurricanes that hit Haiti as tropical storms, hit everywhere else as hurricanes, and in the rest of the Caribbean, they kill a couple dozen people and they kill hundreds in Haiti. And that's because you have a government that has not been able to develop the resilience that others have. Most Haitians will tell you that the solution is democracy, that Haitians be allowed to choose their leaders and to hold their leaders accountable. And that you've had for most of the last 2 centuries, you've had foreign countries, mostly former slaveholding countries, mostly powerful ones, who are calling the shots in Haiti, and that clearly hasn't worked. And President Moise is a good example. I'm not sure who ordered his killing. There's a lot of contradictory evidence, but what is clear is that he presided over a cycle of deepening political violence, and again with the support from the international community. And right before the earthquake happened, the international community is continuing to push for elections in September that most Haitians say they don't want. They don't think there can be fair elections under the current government, and it's really the international community that is cramming down the current government down Haitians' throats. And they're saying, no, let us rule our country. We can make our own decisions, and we can make better ones than have been made in the last decade or two.
Could there be a sort of a Marshall Plan? I mean, Western governments after World War II, they enacted a Marshall Plan, right, for Western Europe after the fall of Adolf Hitler and what he did there. Could there be a Marshall Plan for Haiti that would involve just with Western support, but that hands-off approach that says, okay, there's a Marshall Plan here, but we would allow you to determine your destiny? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my first thought when you describe that is that it's a great idea.
Yeah.
My second thought is that when they did that in Europe, that was for white people. And I think whenever you're talking about Haiti and the international community, you cannot forget about race. And I think that a lot of the reasons why Haitians are not allowed to choose their own destiny is racism. I mean, that was the case in 1804 when they were afraid that Haiti would become a successful country of freed slaves in a world run by slave owning countries, and it's still a problem today. But I think that if aid were generously given and was done in a way where Haitians were allowed to make the decisions, were allowed to build their own capacity, and were allowed to hold people accountable for the money being well spent, I think you could have some sustainable difference in Haiti.
And Brian, any final thoughts from me before we get to the next segment?
I think that the Caribbean community can play an important role in Haiti. Obviously the size of Caribbean economies are not at the level of the United States and Canada and France and Germany. But I think that in the past, the moral position of especially CARICOM. And with the to me, the benchmark for that is the 2004 coup d'etat, when CARICOM stood by its own democratic principles and said, look, we have an interruption in the democratic order. We're not going to allow Haiti to participate as a full member, and stood up in the OAS, which the OAS had the same democratic principles, but just refused to invoke them for Haiti. And I think CARICOM played a really important role in bringing democracy back to Haiti in 2006. And I think that's the type of role. I mean, obviously, whatever generosity the countries can give in terms of aid is helpful, but I think where they can really make a significant, perhaps transformative impact is on standing up for basic democratic principles.
Standing up for basic democratic principles, sage advice. Of course, when we think about CARICOM, citizens of CARICOM countries critique CARICOM governments for sometimes having a double standard where Haiti is concerned, or just putting their hands up in the air, or acceding to the whims of whatever government is in Washington around what their policy is around Haiti. So, Brian, thank you so much for agreeing to appear on such short notice. We will be keeping in touch with you just to get a sense of what's happening on the ground in Haiti. Certainly, you did copy some of your contacts on the email chain that I have with you. We would love to hear from them as part of a follow-up conversation. So, Brian, thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Kellen. Thank you for covering Haiti, and I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care.
Okay, folks, stand by. We will be going to the next segment. And just bear with me here while I pull up that break. And welcome back, folks, for this post carnival segment. And I'm happy to be joined by my guests here this morning, Mr. Sylvan McIntyre, Superintendent of the Royal Grenada Police Force. He's also a specialist in disaster management. And Sylvan, before we get to the post carnival discussion, I'm sure you have been following the developments over in Haiti. No, I know that CARICOM did send a delegation to Haiti in 2010 after that earthquake. So could I get you to respond or react to what happened there last night? And do you know what the RSS might be doing at this time to support our brothers and sisters in Haiti?
So once again, good morning to you. Good morning to your viewers, listeners, persons through the World Wide Web. It's my pleasure to join you on this program and to give my technical input on both sides: self-defense, national security issues, and also disaster management. So as relates to the unfolding event of the earthquake in Haiti, it's unfortunate. So Haiti, I'm sorry, personally, because in 2010, when the earthquake struck, I was one of those CARICOM persons that responded. I actually spent 5 weeks assisting in the relief effort there in Haiti. So I understand the ground and I know how the Haitian people feel. The previous speaker spoke as well as to the aftershocks and the trauma that the people are going through. I saw that as well, where people were on the streets. They were sleeping, outside of buildings and on the road, etc. They did not want to get into any building at all for fear that the aftershocks could have created further destruction. As it stands now, our CARICOM region are preparing for an appropriate response to what's happening there in Haiti. As you will appreciate that Haiti is part of the CDMA system. It's one of our participating states out of 20 of the islands of the Caribbean. So there has been some ongoing discussions. There are the Caribbean donor partner group. They've already met. There is a meeting again at 1 o'clock today, which I also will be sitting in on to listen and give some technical advice as to how the response is likely to be. So there isn't a fixed position yet, but obviously we are positioned to be able to respond in any way that we can support Haiti.
Mm-hmm. Mr. McIntyre, thank you for that. And Akim Lewis, was just saying the same thing. A few years ago, every one of them shared, they changed their Facebook profile pic standing in solidarity with France. But whenever it is Haiti, negative comments and lack of empathy for that country saddens my heart. But let us get into the conversation here around the carnival-like activities that we witness. And I want to welcome Mr. Colin Dow, and I also have Ricardo Kings Douglas. I'm hoping that he can come on screen shortly. But we want to have a conversation around what we witnessed in Grenada last week, but also what we witnessed in Grenada last year. It would appear that the defiance was much more significant in 2021 as it was in 2020. So, Mr. McIntyre, you certainly, one may say that you had your work cut out for you last weekend and weekends before. How were you able to manage such a situation, given the sheer numbers of people who were out in full force, defying COVID-19 protocols, defying the authorities?
I premise the response in the Eastern Division as a reflection of what the RGPF stood for. It was a collective response. It was just not my effort on ground. We analyzed the situation before. We did our introspect, we did our retrospect in terms of what's likely to happen, what we could have done internally for ourselves, and what the situation was likely to be. And prior to the Monday and Tuesday events, we did have a few events leading up to that where there was the carnival-like activities at different communities, etc. Despite carnival being declared as not being there 2021, there were still persons who intended to celebrate. In some instances, they consider cultural activities at community levels. And we had our meetings, and Commissioner was very precise that we're gonna police these events, but we're gonna use 3 watchwords: forbearance, tolerance, and professionalism. And in all of what you saw, our effort, whether it was singled out as an individual leading a number of persons to effect an operation, or whether it was the entire RGPF, our watchwords were definitely forbearance, tolerance, and professionalism. And the outcome, as it stands, all is well that ends well. I think we achieved those. We were forbearing, we exercised tolerance, and I am sure, based on what is seen, that we did exhibit some level of professionalism.
Now, what would be the consequences? Obviously, there are consequences for, according to the law, we are still under a state of emergency. Normally, there would be consequences for breaching those state of emergency COVID-19 protocols. Would we be seeing in the next few days any kind of movement on your part to hold those quote-unquote lawbreakers accountable? What would that look like?
Colin, you would appreciate that what we saw was definitely in a violation of what the regulation speaks to. As it stands now, in a pandemic emergency situation, as it stands, a state of emergency. And as it relates to what the fallouts can be, that definitely is an administrative decision. It has been discussed. We do have evidence of persons who have violated. And to be honest, actions may or may not be taken against persons. It's an administrative decision that is left to be made, but there are followed consequences.
Who makes that administrative decision?
There's an executive.
Is that above your level?
Definitely, it is. There's an executive of the RGPF where, despite an individual officer has the option to prosecute, or not necessarily prosecute, but to charge for an offense. The offenses that we saw are offenses generally against the state, and the executive of the RGPF would decide as to whether or not we should go forward preferring charges, or whether or not we would allow it with warnings, obviously. So that is a decision that has not yet definitely been made. But if you ask me, it is more likely than not that we would go ahead and aggressively prosecute people.
Well, Mr. McIntyre, before I get to the other panelists here, I think a concern that Grenadians have is sort of that there is a lopsided nature of enforcement. The perception is, again, it's a perception, and we have no evidence to suggest that there is no enforcement in, for example, the south of the island, in places like the brewery, for example, where I've witnessed, for example, throngs of patrons patronizing that bar in the south of the island, Lansapine, without any law enforcement present. But how do you speak to the perceived double standard with respect to COVID enforcement?
I would not be the best person to speak on a national level as to what is a perception or correction of the perception thereof. What I understand I can speak to with some level of conviction that the position of the RGPF is to ensure that aspects of the law is upheld to the letter. And there are some times where the level of flexibility, the level of discretion may be exhibited. It depends on conditions that may unfold on the ground. For example, there were situations like we've seen for the last carnival-like activities where we could have arrested persons, we could have picked them up, but an assessment of what exists at the moment did not suggest to us that we should have gone on to do so. And in most cases, our situation, our conditions, our analysis may be perceived to have been differently, save and except when it is analyzed, it will be understood based on what the decision, therefore, is decided on.
Okay.
As the case yeah.
Superintendent, let me bring in Mr. Colin Dow. Mr. Dow, the land of 100,000 jab. Certainly, there are folks who are of the Christian persuasion who take the evangelical Christian persuasion who take offense to that notion because they say that they don't participate in jabs. But again, what we saw in Grenada this year, it harkens back to the 1970s under the Eric Gary regime where he said, we will ban jabs, but we saw what that outcome was. And so can you connect the dots, if you will, of those two historic periods in the context of jab as sort of a resistance movement in the country?
Good morning, Concannon. Good morning to all of your listeners and viewers. It is interesting, and let me just make one correction or edit to the tagline that was developed a couple of years ago. It was Spice Mass, home of 100,000 jabs. And we have embraced that reality. We know that the jab and our Juve morning, like our Monday night mass, are signature events attached to Grenada's carnival. It distinguishes us from every other regional carnival. And that decision was a policy decision that was taken in order to promote Grenada's carnival. Now, jab is both a mass as well as a sound. So you have the likes of Talpri, etc., who would express in song that jab culture. And then you have the Monday morning, and sometimes more than Monday morning, Tuesday morning in Satés, etc., where you have the mass being played in the various portrayals. Now, the carnival itself, as adopted by us, has gone beyond its historical nature. Historical nature meaning that we adopted this idea of carnival from our French rulers as they were, mimicked them in a lot of ways. So the mass that you see portrayed, and I'm going to come to jab shortly, but whether you look at the Shortney, you look at the Veco, and you look at anywhere there was a strong presence of the Catholic Church, there is this type of quote-unquote devil mass. And really it was one of mimicking the owners and masters, mimicking both in terms of joining with the revelry because they played carnival with their fancy costumes, but signaling the oppression that the slaves underwent as part of that whole period of slavery. Now, you may ask, well, isn't jab part of every Caribbean culture or places where there's carnival? And the answer to that is yes. There's a Juve morning in Trinidad, and there's Blue Devils and everything else. But that black really catapulted in prominence in Grenada in the 1970s, but it was linked to the Black Power movement. And yes, the attempt by former Prime Minister Sir Eric Gary to bar that portrayal of that art form. And jab by its very nature is therefore a resistance mass. That is how it has quote unquote grown up over the last 40 plus years in Grenada. So whenever we have controversy surrounding the mass, one can expect a huge turnout of masqueraders in that art form. And you are well aware that when the tagline was adopted, home of 100,000 jabs, there were lots of people calling in saying, who they're talking about, not me, I'm not a jab, so must be mosquito and sandfly, because that's the only way they can come up to the 100,000. Those comments were made. But I would say to you, since the 1970s, in that year, it was the largest number of masqueraders on the streets of St. George, the national show, and around the island. And what we have seen unfolding in both 2020 and again in 2021 is that resistance. Now, we probably would need some sociology experts to come to address the psyche of the Grenadian people, why they felt it necessary to be on the streets in such numbers with this art form. And not that we have not seen protests in other islands. We saw protests in St. Vincent, which led to the Prime Minister getting injured. We saw protests in Antigua, but those were led by political movements. In Grenada, the lead was really taken by King Jab, and people went onto the streets as a part of resistance. Now, the discussion, of course, would unfold as our conversation unfold as to what were they resisting, why were they rebellion.
But I think the subtext was just a blanket cancellation of Carnival. There was also the subtext or the perception that certain communities were being overly enforced, which again, Mr. McIntyre, superintendent, attempted to answer that question there. You know, and I think that was the subtext in essence, right?
And so that, yeah, there are a combination of things, and I do have personal views on this.
Yes.
One would be a case of, should Carnival have been cancelled? Yes. Let's be very clear. Yes, in 2020. Yes, in 2021. I have absolutely no problems with that. Should we then say Carnival is cancelled, but some people can get to have carnival-like activities? Probably that was not the best approach. What I also found very interesting, and I don't know where this came from, whether it was at the board level or whether it was the advisors on Carnival, because there was a subcommittee, my understanding was a subcommittee put forward on what should unfold during the season. And the advice, as I understand, was coming, that was that private promoters obeying certain protocols can have events. But interestingly, the Spice Mass Corporation that is in charge of Carnival was not allowed to have any events. I found that interesting. Yeah. I also note, and I hear that there was an issue that a number of people within the population had, where some people granted, and okay, I was accosted, and I would use the term accosted. I'm walking through the mall, I was accosted, and I said, Colin, so the elites can have their events and we can't have anything. And that was part, unfortunately, of the subtext, because when persons heard being advertised, all-inclusive feds, etc., taking place, when persons saw large events above the 60 that PM would have spoken for vaccinations, etc., in moving forward, taking place at some venues, but yet still, the people in Willis, whenever they came to the streets, there was a huge police presence. There was a movement, and I heard the conversations, that this is unfair, this is unjust. It's either we're having or we're not having. And why can Tom have and we cannot enjoy ourselves as well? So I think what we saw on the streets on Monday and Tuesday was partly that unfolding. You had the individuals who are protesting, and then we do have a youthful population. 60+% of our population is below age 30. So when there is an opportunity to revel, you can expect young people to come out, and we saw that as well. So not everything was protest, some was partying at great risk to themselves and to the population.
Okay, and let me bring in Ricardo Kings Douglas. Ricardo, welcome to the Burr Report. The last time you were here, we were celebrating the life of my colleague and mentor and friend, the late, great George Grant. But it's good to have you back, Ricardo. You were part of the Old Mass. Old Mass didn't die in this period. Old Mass didn't go away. Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, Old Mass didn't go away during this period, and the Sheet Up crew, you kept that tradition alive even during the season. That gave folks a lot of laugh. I'm gonna try and share some of the images that came out of the sheet up crew. But Ricardo, I just want to start. Tell us this year's first of all, give us some background as to the sheet up crew. Are they new?
No, the sheet up crew has been going up for the past 9 years. But first of all, let me explain something to you. We are a responsible group of people, about 8 of us, family, friends, all vaccinated for one. We respected the government authority said no carnival on the streets, which I agree with 100%. It's a new world, so you have to adapt. And what we did, we stayed in our yard and we said we can have our own little old mass in our backyard, which is what we did, 8 of us.
A backyard jam.
A backyard jam, just 8 of us in our little veranda there. And we said, let's just put on our costumes and continue the tradition of old mass and the Shita band. So we did not go into the streets or anything. We stayed in our backyard, as you can see, and we had fun, 8 of us, So the tradition was there, and we respected the authorities about not going onto the streets and no carnival on the streets, etc. But you have to be creative in your own way to enjoy life. COVID can't stop your life. You have to live it. So we made the creation of saying, let's stay in our yard and have our fun among our 8 of us, family and friends, and we did it, 8 of us. So that's where the tradition of the Shita band continued, and the respect of what they said, no carnival on the streets. Now, with that said, Old Mass is part of the culture. Old Mass represents the stories of Grenada. It's like Calypso. You can see what with every placard or every on the players, what's happening in Grenada throughout the year. Not only in Grenada, around the world. And it's a tongue-in-cheek thing. It's a lot of fun. It represents the tradition, which has been there since the 40s and 50s, right? And Old Mass was one of the biggest, before Jab Jab. Old Mass used to be the biggest thing in Grenada. We used Jab Jab in the olden days, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, was always about 4 or 5 jabs going around with their coffin and their Bible and stuff. But Old Mass used to be the first thing on the streets in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And people used to come out to see what was happening in Grenada, what went by. And it's just always a fun thing, So it's very, very important of that tradition, because I call that traditional mass as well. And it's beginning, we were losing Old Mass, So the Shita band posse decides that we try and continue it and keep it going, our own little way. And the pun on words again is sheet. It's the sheets, the white sheets. Everybody have a white sheet. And we would say, like Cowpen, they approve for 50. We only get approved for 5. What sheet is that? So it's a wonderful play on words. And nothing is very blatant. You have to think about it. You have to look at it and understand the little story. And it can't be like 5 to 10, 15 sentences. It has to be like a few words, a few sentences, and it hits you like that. And so as well, some people use Old Mass as a protest as well, so it has this double play as well.
Yeah, it has that double entendre, and this year, some of the portrayals, really speak to a lot of the current issues that are taking place in Grenada. But Ricardo, I want to really expand this discussion into just your thoughts on the staging of cultural activities during this period, and sort of the pushback that we received from certain communities around their decision to defy the authorities. Some might say, well, that is deeply cultural, yeah, and some might say that, well, perhaps there could have been a nice meeting in the middle where you would allow folks to enjoy themselves while also adhering to some of these protocols. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you see, I believe that if you're going to say no carnival on a public level, there should be no carnival across the boards. Fair, and that's it. I believe that. You cannot have a double standard, which is what happened. Unfortunately, that some people were getting permission, himself, you're vaccinated or no vaccinated, because a vaccinated person can still carry the virus, right? So it makes no sense to say that only vaccinated people can have a party or whatever it is, and unvaccinated people cannot. So it's a double standard. If you're saying across the board, no vaccinations, that's fine. I agree with that completely. Now, I think under the circumstances, because of the COVID, it was a dangerous thing to do, because what will suffer, it's the people, the country. Because if Delta gets into Grenada, it's 100,000 people, right? I'm not saying 100,000 jobs, I'm saying 100,000 people in Grenada, right? We don't have the health facilities to adapt to what will happen if there's an outbreak in Grenada. That'll be devastating for us, okay? So on that level, I totally disapprove of what happened in the sense of health for the people of the country and for the country. I think first of all, I'd also like to say the police did a fantastic job, and the jobs did a fantastic job in the sense of respecting each other. I watched that Paradise meeting. It was not a confrontation. And it was easy for 5,000 jobs just to charge the police and cross the bridge and go over, but they didn't, right? So in that level, the jobs understood, they're making their point, and they respected the police, and the police, they were wonderful, because I didn't see any army guys, I didn't see any guys in the SGU, I didn't see any trucks. They just had this confidence that, listen, we're gonna let you do your thing. Although it's not right, we're gonna let you do your thing, and they respected each other. They turned and went back to Pearls, and they did their thing there. Again, you're praying that there's no COVID in that crowd. You're praying for that, okay? The jabs came out because it's a frustration. They've been locked down for 2 years. I'm not saying the jab, I'm saying people. People are frustrated, not only with the COVID, with the lockdowns, with the double standards too, and with what's happening in the country. There's a lot of unemployment, there's a lot of this, there's a lot of that. So all of that combination is building up in people. And Grenadians, it is one little thing. They could be fighting for a big, big thing, but one little thing will trigger it off, right? And I think that's what happened in society with the people with the jabs. Some came out to party, some came out because they're just tired, they're frustrated. And I know it was wrong, and I was hoping that no COVID was in the crowd or stuff like that. But it was something that people just needed an outlet. They needed to get out. And I know there was, in the Gary days, was a totally different thing. We didn't have COVID, so people didn't mind if people went out and they retaliated, they picketed and stuff like that. We didn't have COVID to deal with. Here, people would not have mind if they went out, but we had COVID to deal with, So all of that frustration mixed with what's happening in the country, mixed with COVID, mixed with youth who just want to party, whatever the case may be, they found this opportunity, and they know deep down inside they were not going to be violent, right? The violent ones, whatever happened, maybe a little alcohol would get in their head and they would say things. People are complaining that we're drinking and only the drunk people that came out and said things. But human beings have things pent up inside of them. And sometimes when you take a drink of liquor, it relaxes you. And the things deep inside, the liquor lets it come out. And they say things that they want to say, but they cannot say it, unfortunately, unless they get a drink, So it's a catch-22, but I believe you have to obey authorities. This was the rule, this was the law, and we should have obeyed it. But that's life.
And Colin, let me bring you in here. What if you were in a policy position advising governments on how to proceed with and manage these expectations around this time? What would you say? What advice would you be giving to government?
This one is a tough one. It's really very difficult, and Ricky touched on it. There is, and that's why early on I mentioned the fact that there was protests ongoing in St. Vincent, right? We saw it unfolding in Antigua. That's the frustrations of the lockdown. Good. So there is that pent-up frustration brought about, yes, by lockdown, by the challenges to our economy. I think our minister was mentioning last week that we're running a deficit budget, which is not normal and certainly has not been happening within the last few years. So there are challenges that are taking place, and those challenges, you'd find the frustration coming out. But I am as I said earlier, and I'm with Ricky. If we agree that no carnival, then it should be no carnival. And this is what it is. we have seen within the last week, a week and a half, 2 vaccinated individuals on exiting Grenada in attempting to get a negative PCR test to facilitate their travel, testing positive. They have done nothing wrong based on the protocols. They had negative PCR tests to come in. They had a negative PCR test 48 hours. They were released within community. Now they're traveling back. They have to get a negative PCR test, testing positive. It meant that during that period between their release and when they tested positive, they were functioning among the community. Now they happen to be going back. It could have been a returning national who is not traveling back. And then that individual will remain in community with a positive COVID situation. And it is, quote unquote, carnival season. So they were on Paradise and then in Pearls. And then they went to Sautes. And these are all theoretical, please. So let me just...
I personally, disclaimer, my COVID test was negative on return to the United States, but I was all over Grenada during this period. So imagine all of the visitors we have who are traveling the same. When you come home, you don't stay in the house, you roam.
And that's the point. And that contraction of COVID, the ability to infect others, does not change with vaccination. That we know. It is the wearing of the mask, physical distancing, those are important. Now, we saw some jab, and I like Ricky's reference that in the olden days, jabs were about 4 or 5 because it was a yay, as it was called. And we saw in St. Paul's, both last year and again this year, the physical distancing, etc. And you have some very responsible portrayers of our jab mask, right? And then there is the party. And what we would see is a host of persons who would like to have that revelry, of the old. And I'm telling you, Kellan, it is difficult for me to say how I would have advised, because it would have been no. Let's not. Let us move towards vaccinations where we know that vaccinations can assist in reducing morbidity and mortality, and that's important. So let us continue to promote that. I mean, it's 2 years. I miss it too. I was adorned in black on the second Monday of June. I won't say Carnival Monday, but I was adorned in black as well. I had my chain, but I didn't have on the oil. But we just have to act responsibly.
And Superintendent, let me bring you in here. If you can turn your camera on there for us. What we really want to do is to have a conversation around community policing, because I know that with the Royal Grenada Police Force, community policing efforts are a major activity of yours. It's a major initiative to ensure that we have better relations between police and community. I know that you are in the Eastern Division, so you would speak to the Eastern Division.
Sure.
How were you able to use those tools of community policing to reach those communities where where a lot of the jabs came from in this period?
So one prominent speaker recently mentioned our approach to policing the jab on Monday. He indicated or intimated that police understood that these were members of the community who were intending to showcase, whether it's a culture or whether it's a festive activity, they were intended to make a public appearance. And on the other hand, the police understood as well that we understood that they were human beings. On the other hand, what was shown was that people appreciated that the police had a function to perform. We had a duty, and there was a meeting of the minds, there was the physical meeting as well, and there was the understanding and the appreciation that there's a mutual respect. Albeit that if people had changed their approach, we had to have changed ours as well. But I think generally it is not what you do, but how you do what you do will dictate the outcome. And the RGPF is big on community policing and engaging people. We campaigned on engagement. Inform the people, ensure that they are aware of the violations, but not just the violations. let them know how they can be stakeholders in ensuring that our environment is maintained as a safe place. We are in a pandemic, and one of the things that we wanted to reassure persons, it was not really about law enforcement, but it was about safety for just about everyone. And so when I engaged the job and when we spoke to persons, what we did say to them, listen, it is not life as usual. It is okay for people to demonstrate. It is okay for people to protest. It is okay for people to play mass and to have carnivals and festive activity as well. But there is a time and a place for everything. And obviously, this is not the time for certain things to happen, given the parameters of the pandemic, the control measures that we need to undertake, and the limited uptake in terms of people being vaccinated. That's one of the factors. So it was not very, very difficult for me to have engaged the people and to speak to them and to say to them, listen, we need to be mindful of the environment in which we are, and we have to be careful. As a matter of fact, on Tuesday, I spoke to some folks in Latan Junction and said to them, why are you not wearing your mask? Because persons came out and it was life as usual. So I said, why are you not wearing your mask? In addition to that, we do have the threat of more persons who are penetrating our very, very porous borders. And not just people who are penetrating, but there are Grenadians who are also involved in the illegal trade of narcotics. And they would leave our shows and go on to other shows without our knowledge, and then they would return. And it is very easy for someone to have contracted the virus, enter our shows, enter one of these festive activities, and just like that, we have an outbreak, we have community spread. So that we were able to communicate across communities, indicating to them, we are stakeholders in this process. We all have a part to play. We understand what you like, but there has to be a parameter, there has to be a middle ground, and there has to be an understanding. And this is why, as I indicated when we started, it was about forbearance, tolerance, and professionalism. And I think through our community policing effort, going out there to those communities and ensuring that we portray those qualities, that we were not going to become overzealous, heavy-handed when it was not necessary to do that, but to show people how they needed to become and be more responsible with their actions.
All right, we have some viewer comments which we will take at this time, and I will throw this out to Ricardo and Colin. I think the comment here is from Marissa Gray is asking, is the display of resistance only about Carnival, or was it also an outcry for the conditions that Grenadians are experiencing? Obviously, we don't have a sociologist on the panel, and I know what you might say, Colin, but let's get your thoughts on that.
No, I don't believe it was about Carnival only. So there was the perceived inequity in terms of who was getting permission, who was allowed to do things. There was a perceived challenge with the geographical issuances of permissions. And, you know, so some people, as you alluded to earlier on, some people in the south of the island seem to be doing, well, some people in some sections of the south of the island, because I would mention Willis is also in the south of the island. Some people in some sections of the south of the island seem to have a blank check, as it was, to do what they want. So you have some of that. But I think, as you would see outbursts in other islands, because of the frustrations, the lockdown, the economic circumstances, that's what we saw. I don't know that in Grenada there was a political movement. I think it was more a social movement of resistance and quote unquote protest. In other islands, we may have seen political influence. I don't believe that we saw that in Grenada, but it goes beyond just, I want to play Carnival. I do agree. And it was just some of the things that we are experiencing as a citizenry in Grenada, and hence that boiling over, as it were, on the Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, Ricardo? I agree completely with what Colin said. Also, going back to Inspector Sylvan, Superintendent McIntyre, he dealt with education and information, being informed, and I think they dealt with it in a very, very positive way with the situation of the jabs. But that's what I think we needed before all of this started: education and informing the public exactly the dangers, because sometimes we get mixed signals. One day it's one thing, the next day it's another thing, right? So it's very, very confusing. And as Colin was saying, and I mentioned before, certain segments of society or certain segments of the island gets privilege. And certain clubs in the South, as Colin was saying, I've seen it, I've peeped into it, I've not been in there, I've been in and I walked through because of I want to know these things. Being a writer, I want to make sure what I'm seeing is right and true. And it's packed, and nobody's wearing a mask, and then somebody in a little shop up in Willis or wherever, they want to have a little gathering, and as you say, they're stopped from it. So this kind of mixed signal, it's really, really dangerous. And that's what people are, as Colin was saying, it's not so much political, but politics is there, because politics and government, etc., cause of what's happening sometimes socially, right? But most of the outbursts was a frustration of the COVID, but of a frustration of life. There's so many people, I know friends who are just unemployed. They don't have what it takes. The hospital, I'm sorry, the health system is, right now, a friend went and they couldn't get an x-ray, literally. Things like that are happening. So people are beginning not only to get frustrated, but beginning to get scared. They're scared. They don't know what will happen in the future. So all of that comes out in demonstration, and what we saw with the jabs, but information is so important, and double signaling, because one person says something, Kellan, and then the next week is totally something else, and they say no. Like, for instance, Ricky Bedo, and I praise Ricky Bedo for that. They were going to do an Old Mass competition in Trade Center, right? Trade Center holds like close to 1,200 people, and it was for 200 guests, right? And to spread 200 people inside the Trade Center, that's space for days, right? I mean, you have to throw a stone away. I shouldn't use throw a stone. Sorry for that pun.
Well, you could have put that in the Old Mass too, eh?
Exactly. But because of the things that's happening in Grenada, some people are saying, why are you allowing such and such people to have this? Why are you allowing such and such people to have that? Ricky Bedo decided to cancel it, and I admire him for that. So there's no controversy. He said, I agree with the authorities. I don't want any controversy. If the authority said no carnival-like activities, we're not going to have carnival-like activities, and they cancel it, right? But I'm not coming down on the South, right? But there's certain places that just the police just don't seem to bother with it. And they allow it to happen. Look at that, man. There's a picture right now, everybody. And a lot of the SGU students are coming in now. And they're supposed to be vaccinated, right? And they're out in the community like crazy. Suppose, as Colin was saying, I love that thing he said about it. If a local came into Grenada, and the foreigner who was going out, when they gave him the test, they found her positive. But suppose that was a local who didn't have to go back, and they stayed in society for the next 6 months, and they had the virus, and it's spreading, So COVID is the umbrella of all what's happening here. And if we didn't have COVID, the approach would be totally different, So for me, I am a man, I think Grenada comes first, the citizens come first, because under the circumstances, and we should obey the laws, and think of Grenada, not about our own personal issues, right? At this point, we can deal with our personal issues and the social issues, but we have to think there's a little devil on our back, so to speak, and that little devil is COVID. So we have to be aware of that. It's not about us, it's about Grenada and Carriacou and Petit Martinique.
Correct. Colin, you wanted to jump in?
Yes,
Go ahead.
I just may come in, and I just want to make a distinction, because quite often, and I've heard it both in terms of national address and leadership and policymakers, as well as persons calling in on radio programs, etc. Whenever they speak of defiance, they speak out of the jab. And it is unfortunate that so often we demonize the jab. So whenever we think that something is wrong, there's a violation, you mention jab. Nobody mentioned that VECO play. Nobody mentions shortly played. Nobody mentions the parties with no observance of the protocols that is taking place. You focus on the jab. Now, all of these are violations. And I think it's important to note, because even if there were not individuals in oil, once the violations are there, the risks are there. And we know just how fragile our healthcare system is. And we have to guard against an overrun, with every resource that we have.
And Mr. McIntyre, we have a WhatsApp question here. A viewer is asking, what role did the Grenville Police Station Citizen Advisory Board play in all of this? I suspect sort of your community engagement efforts. I suspect that's what they're talking about. Superintendent?
Yeah, sure. My microphone is on, right? Yeah, I am.
Yes, go ahead.
So yeah, the Grenville Citizen Advisory Board, not just the Grenville, we had St. David's. They were part and parcel of the information sharing process. You may not have seen them on the front line, obviously not a position for them, but they would sit and advise us as to what people are thinking, how best we can reach the people. As Ricky mentioned, my interjection of education information, their role was to inform people across, which they did, letting them know what was the best course of action, and to a large extent discouraging people from wanting to go out and publicly, without being prepared to handle COVID, to be out there and to expose themselves. So that was one of the areas in which they contributed.
Okay, let's get to some other viewer comments, and then for the panel, I'll get you guys to give us some final thoughts and summation here. Elva Gill is saying, Colin Dow, first time listening to you and seeing you. I'm getting to like you. Let's see. Lydia James is saying, a monkey is on the people's back. And that is that. Let's see here. Lincoln Depredine saying, Comrade Colin, they're putting SGU on the spot. Well, let's be clear, he's not here in his capacity as an employee of the university. So, I'm not in the business of gotcha questions and things like that. Lazarus Joseph is saying, I praise the RGPF. In the end, they are the band of the year. Prior to the quote carnival weekend, the police message was different to what was exercised on the ground. The only constant in life is change, and the change in posture is welcome. So, Superintendent, you're getting some positive feedback there. Perhaps you can bring that to your next leadership meeting. And please invite the commissioner to come on the report as well. Suzette Joseph is saying, do the locals have to pay for a COVID test if they walked off the streets and asked to be tested? That's a separate conversation. Wilma Harbin saying, Grenadians need an effective change, a change for more focused intervention and adequate outcomes. The youths are crying out for better guidance for future gains, continued good health and safety for everyone. We have some other comments coming in fast here. Margaret Francis is saying, RKD is correct. It's a tale of two Grenadas, one for the rich, light-skinned elites in the south, and one for the poor, dark-skinned folks in rural areas. And let's see, we have some other comments here. Akim is saying, Ricardo is not mixing, signaling hypocrisy and wickedness in high places. I think he's saying you're not sugarcoating anything there, Ricardo. I think that's what he's saying. Lydia James is saying, yes, Ricardo, you've said it best. Let's see. Robert Ortiz is saying our elected officials are not above the law and should be an example to the rest of the country. For example, the cow pen and 61 West should fall under the same policing in regards to COVID protocols. Let's see. We have a lot of comments coming in, folks. If I don't get to all of them, I do apologize, because the ticker is running really quickly. But let me get you gentlemen an opportunity for some final comments before I get to the former leader of the opposition who is laying in wait. Honorable Batiste, thank you so much for waiting, as well as Mr. William Joseph. Thank you both gentlemen for waiting. We'll be getting to you shortly. I will start with you, Superintendent McIntyre. Some closing comments from you.
Yeah, I wish to just congratulate and thank the entire Grenada CARICOM PT Martinique for the unwavering support to the RGPF. By and large, we've had a minority of persons who showed differently. But if you ask me, and I'm sure that would be Commissioner's response, that we do have the support of the vast majority of Grenada in law enforcement. And for that, Grenadians, we need to be proud. We see on most of, if not every occasion, people will adhere to instruction. They will understand what the role of the RGPF is, and we can see a partnership. So over the what should have been carnival season, we did have, to a large extent, compliance with instructions that were given by the RGPF, and I wish to commend persons for that. I wish to conclude by saying we have to understand the environment in which we operate. And the other thing that we are quite aware of, that situational awareness is critical to our success. And we use this to our advantage. Regardless of what the perception may have been with our strategy in policing, our objectives were realized. We chose the tagline to be forbearing, to be tolerant, and to be professional. At the end of the day, it is our intention to serve every person with equity.
And you say that, Mr. McIntyre, you are essentially the law enforcement arm of the state. You're not necessarily making the laws, right? So I think people, and sometimes obviously people direct their ire at you, but perhaps that ire is probably misplaced and should be directed at the policymakers. But that's just a thought there. Nevaeh Newman say, undoubtedly, the powers that be do not have eyes or mouths for activities in the south of the island. We love you all, but the leader to have to lead the ship better than that. All right. Community policing, that seems to be working. All right, let me get some closing comments from Ricardo and Colin. Who wants to go first? Either of you gentlemen. Ricardo?
Okay, I'm just saying it's a different world, and we have to adapt it. It's not the same, so we always have to be careful, know where we're going, what we're doing, think of your health, think of your family, think of the consequences. There are rules and regulations we might not like, but we just have to adapt to it for now, if there's a curfew at 12 o'clock and you're caught at 12:30, depending, you might meet a policeman who might tell you to go. Then you might meet a policeman who might say, listen, here's your ticket. Don't fight it. You're wrong. After 12 is curfew time. Take your ticket, count to 10, take a deep breath, relax, deal with it in the morning. No confrontation. Same with all the frustrations I'm asking Grenadians. I know it's a tough time. It is not worth it to retaliate with each other at the home. Take a deep breath, go for a long walk. If somebody aggravates you, turn your back and walk away. It is not worth it, because tomorrow you don't want to say, I am sorry, and tomorrow might be too late. So please just breathe, keep the spirit inside you, feel good about yourself. God bless, but it's a new world. Change is constant, it's constantly changing. Tomorrow might be totally different. Okay, so just enjoy life.
All right, Colin?
Yeah, I would just like to add my praise to the work done by the Royal Grenada Police Force. I'm a big fan of the commissioner himself. He's a very good friend. And the tolerance that we saw exhibited in 2021 actually started in 2020. Because things could have gotten catastrophic in Satés on quote unquote Carnival Tuesday last year. They didn't. So the police have been exercising discretion, have been exercising tolerance, and that is important, because we didn't get to the boiling point that we could have. Again, I celebrate Grenadians on the way that we behaved. Yes, it was in violation of the protocol, but by and large, when you look at the number of incidences, I don't believe the RPGF was reporting many incidents of violence, etc. And that too was important for us as a people. As we move forward, let us please observe the protocols, stay up to date on the latest scientific advice, and at the end of the day, physical distancing, wearing of the mask is really what has been working. To keep populations, to keep individuals safe. That is important. From a cultural standpoint, I hope that we would take the next few months to elevate and educate our culture, our heritage. And that doesn't mean only putting on oil on Carnival Monday or every Sunday leading up to Carnival Monday. Learn about its origins, its purpose.
Well, yes, that is an important challenge, but perhaps we need to have that learning at the systematic level. I've always critiqued the fact that we do not have cultural studies in our schools. Grenadian cultural studies ought to be on the curriculum of our schools from elementary school right up to TMI Community College. Sadly, our young people have no sense of their identity, and that needs to change as well. Sorry, I was on a soapbox, but that needs to change.
No. I just stepped aside for you to join me on the soapbox because that was the soapbox that was going on. So we're in total agreement, and
yes,
because what it will bring about, if we understand ourselves as a people, we will act more responsibly as Grenadians. I mean, we are a wonderful people straight off the top. That is given. We should not, though, take that for granted. And as we attempt to elevate this whole idea of Grenadianism, it is critically important that we learn about ourselves. Curriculum in the schools, whether it's radio programs, and some of the local media can take it on. Have a 1-minute segment on things Grenadian, snippets on Grenadian culture. But it is important for us to understand why we do what we do, because in doing so, you'd find that we're able to act a whole lot more responsibly as a population. And this type of education is from the leadership to the smallest individual, because I am not always convinced that some who are in the policy seats also understand nor appreciate our heritage and our culture and who we are effectively as a people.
Mm-hmm. Brother Colin and Ricardo and Superintendent McIntyre, let me thank all of you for what was a very important, enlightening, and insightful discussion. We would certainly be inviting you gentlemen back again for another episode of the report. Mr. Dow, whenever the university is ready, we would welcome you here to have a discussion on the reopening of schools, the SGU. But Ricardo, also thank you, and let's get to the next segment. You guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thanks, Scott. Take care.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know it's sensitive for people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trust you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected. Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not fair? You don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm going to live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? Since losing that seat, what have you been up to? Well, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. But why were there not consultations before moving forward with the proposals? Did they say what will happen when you guys get to St. Vincent? Because there are pressing social economic issues that I would want to address with you. In the hyper-information age of social media, the Bub Report knows there is more to the story. We have questions and demand answers. We strive to hold the powerful accountable and tell an unbiased, contextual story. You know what happened. We let you know why it happened. There is always more to the story. The Bub Report, streaming every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. And welcome back, folks. I'm happy to be joined by Grenada's former Minister of Agriculture, as well as the former leader of the opposition and a stalwart of the Grenada United Labour Party, Mr. Batiste. Thank you for being so patient, and welcome to the Bub Report.
Oh, thank you so much. Good morning to all the wonderful listeners out there. I think it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you this morning on such a great program. And I want to commend you for the job that you have been doing for the Grenadian people, and not just Grenadian, but Caribbean and the world.
Yes, Mr. Batista. Also, I have Mr. William Joseph. Mr. William Joseph, you can just tilt your screen there a little bit so we can. There you go, much better. Mr. Joseph, welcome to the report.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Batiste.
No, Michael. Willie, how you doing?
I tell you. God bless.
So I found out an interesting tidbit of both of you gentlemen, and you know, the universe, I guess, conspired to have the both of you on the Bob Report today. But Mr. Batiste, when you were the Minister of Agriculture, I learned that Mr. Joseph was your permanent secretary.
Yes, and
Is that the case?
let me say he was a real good and helpful PS. He's one of the better PS Grenada I've ever seen in the service, and I have a whole lot of respect for him as a public servant.
Mr. Joseph, do you remember those days?
The respect is mutual. Indeed, I do. Thank you so much.
Okay, so gentlemen, let us get into it. Let us get into the weeds here immediately, and we want to have a conversation around the political happenings in Grenada, if you will. A number of the political organizations, for example, the Grenada United Labour Party, they are attempting to regroup themselves. Obviously, Mr. Batiste, you expressed some concerns with respect to the new I guess concentration of the Grenada United Labour Party. So I would want to start with you. What are your concerns as the party attempts to regroup itself? And shouldn't be a case that, well, the party should attempt to offer an alternative to the Grenadian people? What is so wrong about that?
Well, there's nothing wrong about that. I think I made the announcement since in 1919 that efforts are underway to regroup and, of course, to restructure and rebuild the Grenada United Labour Party. Since our last convention was in 2006, where we elected Colin Francis and I think Wayne Francis as the deputy, and there was a elected executive. At the moment, the GLP does not have a functioning executive. A functioning executive based on the Constitution, because you're elected up to 1 year, and the last elected executive was in 2006, and their term have expired. The leader resigned, the deputy resigned, the president has passed on, has left us, and of course, so too are many of the executive members who were elected at the time. I was given the task by the working group to contact all stakeholders and people who may have an interest in lending a hand in resurrecting and rebuilding the Grenada United Labour Party. And I hit that call. I started contacting everyone. Of course, Jeffrey was one of those contacted, and he agreed that he would participate in the rebuilding process. And I was rather surprised when I heard he's announcing himself as the leader. I think that is kind of premature. The Constitution states that the only way that a leader can be elected is through a convention. And I don't know if he does not understand the Constitution of the party. He is laying claim that an executive that does not exist selected him as the leader. But I think that in itself will be sorted out one way or the other. We have gone through that process before with his father, Mr. Pradam, and there's some precedent as to how
you in essence are in communication with those folks. So you believe that will come to a natural, a favorable conclusion.
Yes, I'm positive. The GRP is a party of love and togetherness, and I think it's Jeff probably fertilizing his ego a little bit, but I'm sure at the end of the day,
fertilizing his ego, you say?
Yeah, right. But at the end of the day, I think common sense will prevail and we'll do the right thing. The GLP is a party, not someone's property. And you just can't jump up and self-appoint yourself as the leader. It's a democratic process. We must put all the structures in place, the party groups, and put the party in a state of readiness so we could go to a convention. And if Jeffrey is elected at a convention, I will be right there with him, joining him and taking the fight on to the enemy, because I think the time has come where the Grenada United Labour Party should play its rightful role, should once again recapture its prominence in the politics of Grenada.
But Mr. Batiste, would you say that Dr. Mitchell has inherited the Grenada United Labour Party base. I mean, he prides himself as being a champion of the working class, and obviously we know that in history, Sir Eric Gary probably symbolically passed on the baton to him at an independence celebration that was held in, I believe, '96. When Sir Eric Gary was honored by Dr. Mitchell. I do remember that moment very well. So would you say
Well,
that the GULP still has its natural base in Grenada?
well,
There
that
have also been significant demographic changes in Grenada since the heyday of the GULP in the 70s.
of course, there is a great democratic changes. Now, in terms of Dr. Mitchell presenting himself as a working class person, the jury is out on that. There have been so many workers challenge the government in the courts over the refusal of Dr. Mitchell and the New National Party to honor provisions of the Constitution that calls for a pension and a gratuity. And you may recall, it was in 1985 when the New National Party came into power, when they validated the Pension and Disqualification Act, and they not just validated it, but they created 3 pension systems. Those who join under the late great Sir Eric Gary, they're getting a full pension. Those who join after 83, of course, it's a different category. And those who join under Dr. Mitchell, of course, they'll be retiring into poverty. And then the NNP created the third pension system is that where they created a pension system for politicians. That's the politicians who have served 2 terms, they get a pension, while the policemen, the nurses, the teachers, the ordinary civil servant, their pension is that is uncertain. The Prime Minister said that he's waiting on a court decision before he would move forward on the pension issue. And I said to him, no, the law is there. Just obey the law. The only way that can change is through a referendum with a 2/3 majority. And as it stands now, provisions of that part of the Constitution have not changed. So he's not a working man's. He's not a workers' champion. If you look at the Imani program, thousands of people are working. They're working, but they don't have a job. They can't go to the bank. They have no security. You have thousands of nurses who are temporary workers, thousands of teachers who are temporary, and the future is uncertain. So you can't label someone like that as a workers' champion. I disagree with that notion.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Joseph here. Mr. Joseph, within the last 2 weeks, there was a WhatsApp audio purported to come from you. I hope that you can give us some confirmation. But you offered some thoughts with respect to the Grenada movement and the launch of the Grenada movement, and in particular, you felt as if its chairman should come under much more scrutiny. Can you expand on what your concerns are with respect to this new political organization on the island?
All right. So thank you very much once again. And if you would allow, I appreciate
Yes.
that you have set the table and that the table is already being served. But I'd like to take a minute or two to position my own napkin, if you would allow a couple seconds before I get...
Absolutely. You can position your own napkin before we start with the appetizers.
Wonderful. You see, because, I'd like to be able to put some perspectives on the table so that our listeners would understand where I'm coming from when I put forward these views, and I would admit that the audio you refer to was in fact published by me. I did say so at the top of it. I want to make a couple of points. One is that, and it has to do with context. If you look at where we're at now as a Grenadian nation, we're going to be 50 years independent very shortly. So we have that coming. It's right there on our doorstep. And we have the immediate impacts of the COVID-19 situation. These two things are converging at the same time. And so we ask ourselves, what is the state of our balance sheet? as a nation. And there are some issues there that show up. It seems to me that we're at a point now where we need to be addressing the future of Grenada in terms of its politics, in terms of its development. So let me say that the nationhood project that was started by Sir Eric Gairy with independence and so on was about 4 things in my view. And those things remain valid today. The first thing is that it was about leadership. Then the second factor I would say would be development, and the third would be the need for a united society. And lastly, the question of a deeper and broader democracy. How do we achieve that? So those things I think remain very valid, and we need to address them. Now, so what is the vision for this Grenada that we all love? Right? In the anthem, there is a reference without a sort of insinuation without definition to reach our destiny. What is that? And before that, in the folklore, we had brighter out of darkness, very colorful. It is a statement of vision. So, but right now we need to lock in a vision for our nation that addresses the next 50 years. Right, of our existence. So, and then given all that has flown under this bridge or and so on, the question of the type of politics that we practice. I call it in my writings this issue of new age politics. Anybody, people can call it whatever they wish to. That's just my choice. What are we talking about? We need, in my view, to go back to that constitution. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just flagging 6 points quickly. We go in the Constitution. We reckon with this issue called good government contained in the Constitution. And we also reckon with the issue called good governance, and meaning enlightened governance, and what that ought to mean for people. And then Ricky may reference it, or what's his name, short in the previous panel, this question of the culture. Colin, my brother, Colin, this question of heritage and culture. So there are some serious platform issues that we need to get a fix on, we need to get a hold on in terms of our national interests. And the last point I would make there is to say that we need to be addressing how we inspire and train our young people, a role that I believe falls properly to what I describe as a generation, the wisdom generation. People who have gotten to the good age of 60 with all the learning and experience to hold the hands and guide the minds of younger generations of Grenadians to take this nation forward for the next 50 years. So that, and then before I shut it up, there are a couple of foundation factors, right? And I raise them now because they have to do with the critique I laid out in that audio that you referred to. Let's understand it. And I think all of us, many of us would know that qualifications speak to what we have acquired. What we have acquired. Certification regarding what we have acquired. Character, on the other hand, is about identity, who we are. That's what the character thing is all about. And when we say that, so it is a standard of predictability. It's not perfection, but predictability. People could bank on the fact that person X believes in so and so, practices so and so faithfully, understand they can trust and they can have confidence in such persons. And then this question of leader. I make a distinction between leader and leadership. And for the time being, I want to suggest that when we need to lock this in, because this is one of the primary issues in my discussion regarding the TGM. It applies to other entities in the politics. The leader, what is this leader? The first thing to me is that this leader ought to be an engine of service to the people. Right? A service to the people. So that requires that he or she also be an engine of unity. And then an engine to achieve our development goals. Has to be a positive inspiration in that direction. Plus, of course, the personal qualities and standards of the individual, especially this question of judgment, good judgment. So that is how I position the napkin, and now I believe I'm ready to be more direct now on this question of the TGM.
Yes, and Mr. Batiste, I'm going to bring you here because Mr. Joseph raised a question about qualifications, which sort of dovetailed into a point you made, I believe, a few weeks ago about, you said doctors, to the effect that doctors, people with qualifications, are ruining Grenada. So are you in agreement with what Mr. Joseph just said?
Well, yes, I am in agreement, sort of. But you know, politics have its own definition of qualification. It doesn't necessarily have to be that of a purely academic nature. Politics have its own moral, its own academic qualifications. So I may agree with him. But on something Willie said, he talked about unity, and I want to go on that a little bit. Now, in 1985, we had two major parties, the GOLP and the NNP, after the Union Island meeting when they were put together. And they contested elections. In 1987, that party split up and NDC was born in 1987 out of division. 1989, the NNP further split up and TNP was born. So Grenada then had 4 political parties. The major party, the NNP that was in power, the GOLP, a splinter group that came off from NNP called NDC, and then another splinter group that came up called TNP. And going back to the history, we would learn that in our parliament, we had representation from 4 different political parties. That
was in 1990, in the 1990s.
In 1990,
yes,
there was a general elections. We saw a splinter group, which was then labeled a minor party, the NDC, because they broke off from the NNP. And in the 1990 elections, what was then the minor party became the major party because they got the majority of the votes deposited in that election. They came out with 7 seats. The GOLP became then the second major party because they came out with 4 seats. And the NNP, that was the major party and the ruling party, then became the minor party with 2 seats. So our history tells us that there is always room for third parties. It has demonstrated before. In the parish of St. Andrews in particular, I think St. Andrews have demonstrated to the rest of the nation that they are more receptive to third parties than probably the rest of the country, because it was in St. Andrews that TNP, which was a newly formed party, they emerged and got 2 seats in St. Andrews. So the question of the leadership, again, I think we have to tread slowly on that. I think I'm not a supporter of TGM, but I believe that Patrick is a capable Grenadian, academically qualified, And I think his presence in the politics is a breath of not fresh air, because he was advisor to the New National Party, but I think it is welcoming at a time when we have a deficiency in leadership capabilities offering themselves as alternative. I think the country is in a good position to have someone like Patrick coming forward. Now, where he goes from there,
it's still up in the air, because again, they're really untested as a political entity. Yes?
Well, I make the comparison because in 1987, when the NDC were born, they too was uncontested. It was untested. The only difference between the TGM now and a breakaway group from NNP then is that they had members of parliament. George Brizan was in parliament. Dr. Francis Alexis was in parliament. Finsley St. Louis was in parliament. And they had some ministerial experience. So they had, in other words, they had more exposure in terms of experience than maybe the Dr. Patrick Antoine may have had. But we saw that was a splinter group. The NDC at one time was a splinter group, and they were a minor party at the time. And we went on to other general elections. We saw in 95 where the NNP became again a major party when they won 8 out of the 15 seats. The GOLP and NDC were minor parties. It was not until 2003 when the GOLP or TNP failed to capture seats in the parliament, and it became a two-party between the NDC and the NNP. And subsequently, 99, when NDP capture all the seats with no seats for NDC. In 2013, the same thing happened. The one party got all the seats. In 2018, one party got all the seats. So now we can say that all the parties in Grenada, you could say, they are minor opposition parties. One may have more support than the others based on the votes that was deposited in a particular elections. But they're all opposition parties at the time. We can't say that we cannot select one party like the TGM and say that they are spoiler, as my friend, not spoiler, but they are transferring democracy, as my good friend and my respected PS had said with TGM. I tend to disagree with him on that.
Yeah, Mr. Joseph, let's get into it. I mean, you were suggesting that they are, as Mr. Batiste said, the TGM might be sort of upsetting the voting bloc to the point where they might splinter votes. How do you respond to that? Claim that you raised?
Yeah, let me say this. I hear Michael saying, with reference to those who formed the NDC, that in fact they were previously elected by the people. So it goes to this question of who, which is at the heart of this thing. Who? It's not so much the what. That's why I made the point at the beginning that the what has to do with, qualifications, what you have, whether it's formal qualifications or non-formal qualifications. That's fine, fair game. But they belong to the category of the what. The leader has to do with the who, and that thing is banked on this question of character. Now, the mission of every serious political party must be to have the opportunity of forming the government of Grenada. If you're serious. If you are serious, it's not just that you exist with a name called political party. We have to go further and ask, you must answer it yourself. What are your chances, reasonably so? What are the prospects of you forming the government of Grenada? So we have an issue there. When we talk about the TGM is largely the story of one man. It is, let me repeat that. It is largely the story of one man, a guy who is known for his technical capacity, Nobody could take it away from him. But in terms of leadership credentials, I challenge anyone to demonstrate, to show me how, in fact, he has established that. Now, it is true that many of the conscripts and so on who labor in his vineyard have been engaged in poaching disgruntled NDC people and so on. That is known. I am not inventing that. So that is the truth of their situation. So I ask, it's a fundamental question that Patrick must answer. Given the fact that he was so deeply embedded with the NNP for so long, it is the only party he has ever had any relationship with. And he has served them in a multiplicity of roles and a personal relationship with Prime Minister Mitchell for many, many, many years. So when you say NNP, you say Keith and you say Patrick. So the TGM, being the story of one man, requires that one man, Patrick, answer this question. What is it that constitutes in the NNP today a bad cause that you can no longer support? What is the NNP bad cause that you have pulled away from? And I've challenged him on that because it is known that he did not fall out with Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister, on the basis of policy differences or any such things. It was a personal, they differed on personal and private matters. So what is the footing? And he must answer also, what is the good cause that the TGM is seeking to bring to bear for the benefit of the Grenadian people? So I am not in the business of allocating votes. That's for the people to decide. I am talking about the setup, the who you are and what you represent. And the public will judge you. They've had a launch recently, and I think all fair-minded observers would say that it does not appear that they have stirred the ground. It does not appear so. And to that extent, we are still reckoning, in my view, with the NNP and the NDC as the primary parties in the minds of Grenadian people.
When you say they have not stood the ground, can you expand on that? When you say the TGM has not stood the ground.
No, not stood, stirred.
Stirred. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Stirred the ground.
I am not getting the feedback. There's no excitement. I don't hear people saying, yes, we want TGM. Yes, TGM is the answer. I hear people saying, listen, NDC, you need to pull up your socks big time. I hear people say,
but it's also not a clarion call that says, yes, we want the NDC either.
No, I agree with that. Of course, that's why I say, remember what I just said? I said, I'm hearing people say to the NDC, listen, you need to fix yourself. And you need to fix yourself in two primary ways. The first one, of course, is to find a leader who's credible. And the second thing is to begin to message the Grenadian people, meaning your PR, that engine, that machinery must make sense. So that's where it stands for me at this point.
And I'm going to bring in Mr. Batiste again and Mr. Joseph here. Last week, we also saw sort of an agreement to come together between the current leader of the opposition, who, to my mind, does not necessarily have a natural base, except that he crossed the floor. He got into parliament on the strengths of the ruling NNP, as well as the National Democratic Congress. They're agreeing to form some kind of arrangement, I suppose, ostensibly to contest the next general election. But Mr. Batiste, I want to start with you because you were part of recent history with that kind of coalition building, where in 1995, when Dr. Mitchell won the election, he sort of had a cooperation with the Grenada United Labour Party. So do you see this NDC Tobias Clement merger as working in moving forward? What are your thoughts on that?
Before I go into that, I just want to refer to something that Willie said. He said that Patrick have not come out and inform the nation as to what was the problems within he and Dr. Mitchell, why he chose to go that route. I partially agree with him with that regards. I think the onus is upon Dr. Patrick Antoine to explain to the people what is the difference between he and Dr. Mitchell, since he was an advisor. But I also feel that as a Grenadian, he's entitled to have ambition. He's entitled to say, I want to be prime minister. And if I am with Dr. Mitchell advising him, the chances of me being prime minister is nil. So I want to be in a position where I could lead a team, take that team to the people, and if they approve, I could be prime minister. And I go back again in 95. 95, Dr. Mitchell challenged the establishment then, the NNP, and one took over the leadership from Herbert Blaise and Ben Jones, and he put together a team of relatively unknown, Spaceman, Lorena Waldron, Jules Berry, Oliver Archibald, and so on. He presented a team, and he was successful in the 1995 election. So I think we had to exhibit some measure of fairness here to the brother, and said, look, he wants to be prime minister. Let him sell his case to the Grenadian people and let them decide to do so, as others have done in the past. Now, in terms of the situation with the NDC and Clement, did you say an alliance?
Well, they are in talks. They're in talks to cooperate and to I suppose.
Well, you cannot compare that with 95. Mm-hmm. In 95, you had two established parties meeting after an election and talking about a strategic cooperation. The strategic cooperation was beneficial on one side, on one end, to the leader of the GOLP, and on the other hand, it benefited the leader of the NNP as well. Both sides got what they wanted out of it. Dr. Mitchell astutely recognized that Sir Eric Gairy was ailing, but he had some assets. His assets was the supporters of the GOLP. Sir Eric Gairy wanted something from Dr. Mitchell, something that the previous government had refused to give him. You may recall, after the PRG over, the bishop took over as reign of the government in the coup, they seized Sir Eric Gairy's property. There was a court order that went in Sir Eric Gairy's in favor. The court ruled that his property plus interest must be paid to him. The NDC Prime Minister at the time, Sir Nicholas Brafford, said publicly that he'd rather go to jail before he gives Sir Eric Gairy 1 penny. Dr. Mitchell seized upon that opening, and in his campaign he said, look, if the NNP is successful in the 95 elections, I would return all Sir Eric Gairy's property to him plus interest. So the voters at the time saw some association within the NNP at the time and the GOLP. In other words, it was, if I can't vote for GOLP, I would vote for NNP. That is what the prevailing thought was on the ground at the time. Now, in terms of Tobias and the NDC, situation is a lot different. Tobias does not have a party, and in my opinion, he's not what I would call a effective opposition leader. I think he was doing much better as a backbencher, I might add, because of course one may say he was like the lice in Mitchell's head was was itching a lot more than it is now, because in sometimes he remained passive and is not addressing the pertinent issues affecting Grenada, CARICOM, PT Martinique, and that's my honest opinion. I don't know how much assets he's bringing to the table. I don't know what he's bringing to the political table in terms of some benefits to the NDC. In that constituency, in the Northeast, he was the recipient of voter pardon that caused Nazim Bok and the NDC that seat in the last two general elections. He does not have a party, so there's not an alliance. It has not been stated clearly, and it's rather confusing at the moment. What is actually happening? Is he going to join NDC and represent NDC in the parliament? He'd now become a member of NDC, or is he gonna, or are they planning to give him a bye in the elections because he does not have a party and he plan on contesting that seat? Are they going to give him a bye in a constituency where they have a very good chance of winning without him? So I don't know. As I said, the similarities are not there like it was in 95 with the strategic cooperation with the Grenada United Labour Party and the NDC. GOLP got what they wanted, NNP got what they wanted, and of course both sides were.
So both sides were left happy. Mr. Joseph, let's hear from you. Just your reaction to what the NDC and Mr. Clement announced last week.
Right, and thank you again. Now, remember the top of my contributions, I raised this factor of unity. And I raise it because something tells me, following this politics for a long time, that it is one of the deep desires of the Grenadian people. It has eluded us for a very long time, and the party divisions and so on, the more we have parties, the more we multiply the division issue among ourselves. So it has not been good for us. So let me respond to three issues. The first is the unity question. And I think in relation to Tobias and the NDC, at face value, it strikes me as being a symbolic contribution towards unity. In other words, it seems to me that people are saying, well, let us demonstrate to the Ghanaian public that we are prepared to work with people other than ourselves, which might be something of value and would open the door, presumably, to others to go in there. Now, Michael raised the point about ambition and the right of ambition. Yeah, I mean, every human being has the right to want to aspire to this and that and the other. Fine, nobody could argue against that. But when it comes to leadership of the nation, when it comes to that is an issue that is not, in my view, to be approached in a flippant way. I see, and for me, the need for people to consider this issue of good judgment in relation to the needs of the Grenadian society. What is best? For too long, we have a projection from the eyes of the politician onto the people. They're telling us what they want to tell us. And if they say we eating bakes in the morning, that's what we eat. If we eating cake the next day, that's what we must eat. So they are so dominant in our lives. They tell us, and they give us, and they treat us, how they wish to. So this question of judgment is very, very important. No, otherwise remember Shakespeare, Michael, where he talks about vaulting ambition, that all leaps itself and falls on the other side. He wasn't talking about Grenada, but it's applicable to us. And we have seen it all around us. Fellas who get out of their pants, they presume that they are the best thing since sliced bread and say that they're ready to lead Grenada. You know, a gentleman, highly qualified, who said he was coming to rule to be prime minister. You know that, and he you know, that didn't happen. It has not happened. So you know, it goes with the thing. So that's my point about ambition. The last point I make, Dr. Bob, has to do with this question of coalition.
Let's stick a pin here because, and that's for both of you gentlemen. Brian Grimes, trade unionist, he's saying, would your goodly panelists endorse a political amalgamation of all fringe parties, including the TGM, to form a competitive coalition against the NNP monopoly? And I think that goes to the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, let me make it now. At the face of it, I begin by saying no to coalition on three bases. The first is the history. The most powerful demonstration of the thing, or example of it, we had was 76. The GNP was well known and was relatively strong. They had been beaten by Sir Eric for many a year, but an election cycle, but they had support in the country. And then we had the NGM, young and so on, and with growing support among young people and the Grenadian working class. So they were both relatively appealing organizations and came together. And even with that combined strength, they could not defeat the GOLP. The elections were 9-6. Michael knows that. So I would say that the history has not spoken in favor of that. But perhaps the most telling point against this coalition thing has to do with the culture of the Grenadian people. And we go to this question of leader. That's where it settles. In the coalition model, people have no certainty as to who the leader is or is going to be. And if you tell them out of these three people who've joined into one and so on, this person, the leader, in the back of their mind, there is instability. Because they don't know which Monday morning somebody will come and say, we oust this one and we put in this other one. And we need stability. We need to have a leader in whom we could put our trust and confidence. Now remember, and I shut up after this point, we go back to the era of the estate system. Poor people worked on estates. They were in a relationship with the estate owner. This fella provided for them a stable job and a reliable wage, as small as it was. And he gave them a little fruit and vegetable and this and that. They were thankful. Poor people understand loyalty. The estate system demised and replaced by something called government. The estate owner is no more. He has been replaced by somebody called prime minister. It's a relationship issue. We need to be in a relationship with someone with the expectation that this someone is not just going to represent us, but is going to deliver and for us the things that we need and protect our interests and help us along.
But Mr. Joseph, wouldn't you say that Dr. Mitchell has mastered the art of quote unquote the estate system of cultivating relationship with the constituents?
Absolutely.
That enables him to have that loyal base.
Absolutely.
People might sort of diminish the debushing activity, but it's part of his wheelhouse, right? It's part of his political wheelhouse.
I agree with you.
And would you say that the other parties have that deficiency, that they don't have the ability to cultivate that kind of interpersonal relationship with their constituents?
You see, the evidence shows that from time to time. You see. Remember, this leader question stands on two pillars. One is the cultural one regarding this thing that we call charisma, natural appeal. Eric Gary, Morris Bishop to some extent, and a little lower down the thing, Keith Mitchell himself. So the other platform, the other pillar, is that of stature, respectability. So people can say, for example, I ain't like him, but I respect him. And when people could say of a leader that they respect this individual, then that leader is in play. So it is not only the question of charisma, it is also the question of respectability. What is your reputation among the people? What is your record of service to the people? How do you treat people? What is your outlook on the national interest? These are things that matter to a lot of people. And we have to, this program won't allow us, but perhaps at some other time, we have to apply these thoughts to the voter categories in Grenada, because it's not a monolithic thing. Poor people vote in a particular way for certain reasons. Working class people vote a particular way for certain reasons, and so on and so on and so on. So perhaps some other time we could drill down into those things.
Yeah, we certainly would have the time. We have an election coming up soon. But let me get to some viewer comments to both of you. Sam Jimison, everybody wants to rule. It won't work. They also like airing their dirty laundry in public. Every day, a member of an opposing party plays into the hands of the leading party, giving them more ammunition to defeat them. They need to learn from the Prime Minister and understand politics. He gets it. Let's see. We have another comment. Another viewer is saying, I'm not voting for no ancient leader for NDC. Give us something fresh. Another viewer comment says, since Toby gone quiet after his performance in Chains, I drew back from him. I guess she's referring to the time when Tobias latched himself to the parliamentary table there in handcuffs. Let's see. We have another comment from Luis Nayak Francois, who is saying, in a democratic system, people move from one party to the other. That's the democratic system that we have. Keith Mitchell came from other parties, so have David, Chester, and others. There are diaspora people, very well qualified in a vast range of skills, experience, and status, who appreciate TGM's political philosophy. The question to you men of the politically failed Grenada over an extensive period is, what have you guys done to bring change and improvement to Grenada's nation status at home and abroad? Michael Jones is saying strategy is important. Someone is joking here, Mr. Batiste, lice in Mitchell's head. I guess they thought that was a funny quip. But we also have another comment here from Lincoln Depredine. He's saying, I agree, Michael. In a democracy, people are free to associate and participate as they wish, as candidates, as leaders, whatever. They are beholden to no group. No group is entitled to their support or vote. Let's hear your comments and reactions to some of these viewer questions.
Well,
Mr. Batiste.
First, let me say that since 1985, two parties have governed Grenada since 1985 in a sort of a susu-like thing. The NDC got two hands, NNP got most of the hand. And when you look at the state of Grenada today, when you look at the state of our young people, our education system, our agriculture system, the rural economy, when you look at our huge national debt, one may ask the question, have these two parties served the people of Grenada in a way that we all can be proud of? So, by having someone else appearing on the scene and presenting a different point of view, I think it is welcome. As I said, I'm not a supporter of TGM, I'm not a supporter of Patrick, but I welcome a third party. I welcome new ideas. I welcome Patrick's quest to want to lead the country. It means that another capable Grenadian has shown up. And if we could unite and come up with a serious alternative, we can defeat the new National Party easily. The new National Party has absolutely nothing to offer Grenadians in terms of development. I think Dr. Mitchell have exhausted all his efforts. And I think now is the time that the political parties should put aside their differences and work together to form a united approach so that the people of Grenada can be released from the chains that they're under, the economic chains that they're facing now. Our young people who are working without a future, with no pension, no gratuity. So many people going to bed at night with no food on their plate. We've seen Grenada being sold out to foreigners in a CBI program. We have seen the decay of rural communities. We have seen poverty increase. We have seen hopelessness, as was demonstrated. Hopelessness and frustration has been demonstrated by the jab in the protests on Carnival. The Grenadian people are tired of what's going on, and they're calling for a change. The people are ready, and really, it is now left to folks like you and I to get involved, mediate whatever obstacles are in the way, and let's form a united approach and get rid of this new national party. And Willie, you have a role to play. You're experienced public servant, you're a capable individual, and lay off of Patrick a little bit.
But you know, Michael, I mean, you speak so well as you always do. And it's not a question of beating up on Patrick. You know, we must know the times.
No, direct your fire at the occupant of the office, but not the occupant.
No, we need to, but I join you. In fact, this question of united front is not defined as coalition, because the coalition model, I don't think, appeals to the electorate for reasons that I gave. I advanced two reasons. The third one, of course, is arithmetic. Right? I do not believe that the crumbs off the table make a loaf. So you take 200 from me and then you bring them back to me when we make some agreement. That don't make any sense. But I accept a situation where people of talent, God has blessed so many of our sons and daughters, both here in Grenada and outside of Grenada, with so much learning, so much experience, so much capacity, that we need to bring these things to the service of the people, to help our the nation to move forward. So we need an umbrella. The NDC is an established political organization with some foothold, not a toehold, a foothold. Let us talk. I embrace your suggestion that we encourage other people and so on with an interest to work together, come together, negotiate issues so that they offer the people a platform that makes sense. That makes sense. But this empire thinking, which is something that I really find is out of touch with our reality, is not helpful to us. Every man wants to have his own thing because he tells himself he has a right. Well, of course you have a right, but you and I know we're driving all the time and we have right of way in certain situations, but you take your right of way and the other man smashes you up. You know, you're enjoying a right, you know, you're not. So, you know, the same thing applies with what we are talking about. But I was shut up by saying this, Michael, that I agree with you entirely. A number of us should be prepared to put our best efforts to help our brothers and sisters with ambition, with capacity and so on, to stabilize their judgment. Because we have to bring all of that to bear in the context of what is good for the Grenadian nation, not what is good for ourselves as individuals, right? We will get benefits down the line, but let's first think of how we can make this happen for Grenada, bearing in mind what has happened to us for the last 50 years. So when I talk about the new vision, let them come together and put that forward to the people. What kind of politics are we going to practice? Let us see that. That's what I'm for.
Mr. Joseph, we have to come up for air. We will take one final break. This was a very important and very substantive discussion, which is why I allowed it to continue. So let us take a quick break and we will come back for some final comments from both of you gentlemen. Stand by.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, But I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not fair? Don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm gonna live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? And welcome back, folks. Before I get Mr. Batiste to join us with some closing comments, we have a question that came in on our WhatsApp. A viewer is asking, in recent times, there have been great improvements in the area of agriculture. For example, farm labor support for farmers, where they have gangs like the bushing gangs going and cutlass and plant crops for persons. What are your thoughts on the improvements made, and how influential will be the reform in the agricultural sector's agricultural science syllabus in primary schools in encouraging youthful involvement in agriculture?
In terms of the stride made, and the caller, I don't know if he's giving me a full toss.
He might be.
He might. My brother Willie could testify to that. That farm labor subsidy program started under us. Farm in the resurrection of the banana industry. Willie was a sitting PS there when we introduced what I call my hurry up offensive scheme in the Ministry of Agriculture with the assistance of Daniel Lewis and able agronomists, and together we resurrect the banana industry. So thank you, caller, for giving me that full toss. And let me say, it was not Dr. Mitchell idea. It was something that was in the Ministry of Agriculture. We were paying farmers to work their own land because we recognized that farmers were broke. They could not work the lands, and the debushing program was hindering the process of agriculture because a farmer can't pay $50 a day to work his farm. So we sat down and we devised a plan, and here is one of the architects of the plan right there, Willie, and he could tell you. So tell them we're not reinventing the wheel. It's a wheel that was already turning. Now, in terms of I don't know if it's the final comment. In terms of the coming together, we already had 2 back-to-back 15-0 against the NDC. Dr. Mitchell have no respect for the political organization of the NDC in its present formation. It's just like a basketball team that has lost in the finals. When you lose in the finals, you don't go back to with the same team. You strengthen your front line. As it stands now, there's another segment of the section of the population that we leave out, voter apathy. There's a lot of people that say none of the above because they're tired of the two parties, and what they do, they stay home. A lot of NDC supporters stayed home in the last election because they did not like the formation of the team, and they believe that the team should be strengthened. So improve on the team. The NDC has a solid base, and they are the recipients sometimes of anti-Mitchell voters. A lot of votes that deposited with NDC sometimes is not necessarily NDC vote, but people who are anti-Mitchell. Let us strengthen our approach in going forward to defeat the NNP. Let us put all the capable people in place. Let us unite. Patrick is there. Patrick can add. With the addition of Patrick in a united approach, that can be a formidable task, a formidable force. And if that were to happen, the NNP would lose the election in a landslide because there is enough capable people that can hold the mantle of Prime Minister and can make a serious effort in the development of our country. And really, let's work on that.
All right, Mr. The ball is in your court. We're about to wrap up. We're about to wrap up the meal here with dessert. So I give you the chance to do that.
Still have my napkin on,
Well, I would say you put a lot of items on that napkin, I don't know how much that napkin can hold, but please proceed.
But I welcome the encouragement by Michael and so on, and I agree entirely. There's an opportunity, and that is the crux of the matter. I criticize Patrick on that. He did not identify correctly the opportunity facing the Grenadian people. So he bung away, Michael, he bung away with this thing. And you know that he turned his back, I am advised, on talks and so on to come together and work. So let's bring him back to good sense and bring others of talent and capacity to the table so that we get that thing together to present to the people. Not a multiplicity, not a this party plus that party, but talents. Right, let's do that. Let me make a final point about observation of this agriculture question. And yes, you are correct in terms of the efforts back then and so on to begin to make a difference there. But these days, when we talk agriculture, we have to define what it is we're talking about, what agriculture we're talking about. There's a phenomenon that's affecting the old agricultural model that we are not paying attention to. It has to do with the education of farmers' children and the extent to which, as they have achieved higher education, even though they might live in a farming community, their entire orientation is towards another place, another set of values. You see, so they can buy nice cars, the roads are reasonably good, they can get home in 30 minutes. But their belly, their heart and soul and their thinking is not towards production of this and that and the other. Now, we have another problem on top of that, which has to do with the extent to which the foreign thing has contaminated the consumption pattern of food by our young people. We talking thing, and when we talk about eat what we grow and grow what we eat, and food coming in barrel. You know what coming in barrel? Food coming in by boat and plane, in barrel and otherwise, because there is commerce there, and there are people supporting their families. So it's a complex issue. So we need to define the thing, and we need to identify the opportunities for investment in agriculture, aspects of agriculture that make sense, and that would give us. So we cannot respond to this question of what we do for the economy by simply throwing up agriculture. It has to be a bundle of alternatives, not alternatives, a bundle of options. Agriculture being only one of them. So I rested there. I thank you, Dr. Bob, for your kind invitation. I thank Michael for his good, kind consideration, repeatedly so. And I hope that we can get to work to help our friends to bring this thing together in the best interest of the Grenadian people. That's what our nation needs. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you for agreeing to appear on the Bob Report. To you, Mr. Batiste, thank you on such short notice. For those who don't know, a fun fact about Mr. Michael Batiste, he is actually a St. David's man. He's originally a Pomerose man. I have a bias for Pomerose, so I just wanted to put that plug in there, Mr. Batiste.
Yes, my family came from there. Yes, of course.
That's right.
He has never publicized that, He like to say from Grenville.
My family came from there. My mother and my father.
Yes. Okay, viewers and listeners, so let me thank you for staying with us. We went way over time today, but given the nature of the discussion and given the nature of our topics today, I felt that it was important for us to extend the show by another hour, really, so that we can have these very important discussions. I thank all of you for continuing to participate in the program by way of your comments. Jennifer Gibbs is saying, good discussions on the show today, Dr. Bob. Like his views or not, I always find Mr. Joseph's political analyses very interesting. I must also commend you on the quality of the production of the show. It keeps getting better. Certainly, we thank you and we welcome both positive, negative, constructive feedback, because that is how we grow the program. But I would want to leave us with a clip from the Black Wizard. Black Wizard sang a song, When the Carnival is Over. And we will be turning our focus to when the carnival is over in our series of programming items for the next few weeks as we focus on back to school and we focus on the issues that are affecting the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. So on behalf of the production team, on behalf of my hardworking producers, I thank you again for tuning in for another week of the Bob Report. Have a great week, and I will leave you with the great Black Wizard.
Calypsonian number 2, ladies and gentlemen, Elwood McQuilkin, the Black Wizard, When the Carnival Over.
Politics, that is why you keep getting licks, Calypsonian. Carnival is gay abandon, so just sing me two roadman songs to wine and jam. Y'all I love me bacchanal too, and I want to jump up with you and Juve man. But on the other hand, I have to be concerned about this land, because when the carnival over, we still need a brighter day. When we done dance this soca, our problems won't go away. National debt levy will still be here with we, and they might tell we next they go into the IMF. We gotta think about the nation's future when the carnival over. Dubalabadumbe, Dabalabalambe. You attacking politicians and established institutions religiously. That is why you won't really come, so it's time that you abandon commentary. Girl, it seems that you do not know the true purpose of this great calypso art form. Every true Calypsonian has an obligation to inform, because when the carnival over, we still need a brighter day. When we done dance this soca, our problems won't go away. There'll still be corruption, there'll still be drug barons, the public health system will still be frightening. We gotta think about the nation's welfare when the carnival over. Dubalabadumbe, Labalabalambe. You are attacking politicians and established institutions religiously. That is why you won't really come. So it's time that you abandon commentary. Girl, it seems that you do not know the true purpose of this great calypso art form. Every true Calypsonian has an obligation to inform, because when the carnival over, we still need a brighter day. When we done dance this soca, our problems won't go away. There'll still be corruption, there'll still be drug barons, The public health system will still be frightening. We gotta think about the nation's welfare when the carnival over. Do whatever do me. We gotta think about the nation's future when the carnival over.